Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The morning Amara Johnson discovered her worth wasn't measured in tears, but in the trembling hands of those who'd underestimated her. Snow fell on the Langston estate like ashes from a burning empire. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Connecticut mansion. Her reflection, a study in composure. The silk emerald dress she wore, chosen specifically for this moment, caught the light from the 12-foot Christmas tree behind her. Every detail of this morning had been orchestrated, from the Tiffany earrings Marcus had given her on their first anniversary to the subtle application of the perfume his mother, Vivian, claimed was too exotic for their circles. "Darling." Everyone's waiting in the drawing room. Marcus Langston's voice carried that particular tone of condescension he'd perfected over their 5 years of marriage. He stood in the doorway, his Italian suit impeccable, his smile holding all the warmth of the December frost outside. Amara turned slowly, her movements deliberate. Of course they are. The drawing room held the entire Langston dynasty. Vivian Whitmore Langston sat in her throne-like wingback chair, her silver hair coiffed to perfection, her judgment already rendered in the slight curl of her lips. Clarence Langston stood by the fireplace, checking his Patek Philippe watch with theatrical impatience. Sophia lounged on the settee, her phone ready to document whatever humiliation was about to unfold. Vivian's voice cut through the room like crystal breaking. "How appropriate that you finally joined us, though I suppose punctuality was never stressed in your background. 5 years ago, such words would have stung. 5 years ago, Amara had been the brilliant young attorney from Thibodaux, Louisiana, who'd caught Marcus's eye at a charity gala. She'd given up her position at Hawthorne, Sullivan, and Associates, given up her cases defending those who couldn't defend themselves, given up everything to become Mrs. Marcus Langston. She'd endured their subtle cruelties, their constant reminders that she was a guest in their world, not a member. "My apologies, Vivian," Amara said, taking her place on the sofa across from them. "I was selecting the perfect gift for this occasion." Marcus cleared his throat, producing an envelope from his jacket with the flourish of a magician revealing his grand trick. "Amara, we need to discuss our future, or rather the lack thereof." He placed the envelope on the coffee table between them. Through the expensive paper, she could see the letterhead of Wentworth, Carver, and Associates. The city's most ruthless divorce attorneys. 5 years, Marcus continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. 5 years we've tried to make this work. But let's be honest, we come from different worlds. This was never going to last. Sophia raised her phone slightly, ready to capture the moment Amara broke. Clarence shifted his weight, uncomfortable but complicit. Vivian's smile widened imperceptibly. Amara reached for the envelope, her fingers steady as she opened it. She read through the terms: abandonment of all claims to Langston assets, a modest settlement that would barely cover a studio apartment in Queens, and, of course, no mention of the company she'd helped him build. "You were always too ambitious for your own good," Vivian added, unable to resist twisting the knife. "A girl from the bayou playing dress-up in Dior. Did you really think you belonged here?" Amara set the papers down gently, then rose with the grace she'd learned. Not from their etiquette coaches, but from her grandmother, Beatrice Johnson, who'd raised 9 children with dignity, despite Jim Crow's attempts to strip it away. "Before you escort me out," Amara said, walking to the Christmas tree, "I have a gift for you." She retrieved a small box wrapped in silver paper adorned with a single white ribbon. The weight of it in her hands felt like justice itself. She placed it before Marcus with the same ceremonial precision he'd used with the divorce papers. "Open it," she said simply. Marcus's fingers worked at the ribbon with sudden uncertainty. Inside the box, nestled in white tissue, lay 2 envelopes. His hand hesitated before selecting the first one. As he read, the color drained from his face like wine from an overturned glass. This can't be legal." "Every signature authenticated, every transfer documented," Amara said. "Jasper Thornton took possession of Langston Development Group at midnight. The sale was finalized 3 months ago." "That's impossible." Clarence stepped forward. "The company is in Marcus's name." "Actually," Amara interrupted, If you check the incorporation documents from 3 years ago, when Marcus needed my expertise to navigate that federal investigation, you'll find the holding company is in my name, a detail your son insisted upon for tax purposes. He was so confident I'd never understand the implications. Vivian rose from her chair, her composure cracking. You can't do this. That company is worth $800 million at current valuation. Amara finished. Though Jasper paid a premium for the satisfaction of acquiring his rival's empire, Marcus's hands shook as he reached for the second envelope. The ultrasound image fell onto the table, followed by the medical report from Dr. Nia Adebayo, the best obstetrician in the state. 12 weeks, Amara said softly. The heir you've been pressuring me to produce for 5 years. The grandchild Vivian demanded as proof I could contribute something worthwhile to the Langston legacy. The silence that followed was absolute. Sophia's phone lay forgotten in her lap. Clarence gripped the mantelpiece as if it might steady his world. Vivian sank back into her chair, her mouth opening and closing without sound. You planned this, Marcus whispered, the papers crumpling in his grip. You knew about Vanessa, about everything. Amara smiled then, not with cruelty, but with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who'd played a long game and won. 6 months ago, when you took her to the Vineyard House our anniversary weekend, I knew. When Vivian told the ladies at the Greenwich Club that I was fertile enough despite my origins, I knew. When Clarence suggested I should be grateful for the privilege of bearing the Langston name, I knew. She walked to the door, then turned for one last look at the family who tried to break her. Your divorce papers are accepted. My attorneys at Harrington, Dubois, and Meridian will handle the details. As for the children, actually. It's twins, they'll know their worth from birth. They'll never beg for crumbs at anyone's table. Amara, wait. Marcus started forward, but she raised her hand. Merry Christmas, she said. May you finally understand what it feels like to lose everything you thought was yours by right. As she walked through the marble foyer for the last time, her heels clicking against the stone like a countdown to their ruin, Amara heard Vivian's voice crack. Get Jasper on the phone. There must be something. But Amara knew there was nothing. Every move had been calculated, every document bulletproof. The girl from Thibodeau had played by their rules and won with a hand they never saw coming. Outside, her driver, not theirs anymore, waited with the Bentley she'd purchased in her own name last month. As they pulled away from the estate, snow still falling like a benediction, Amara placed her hand on her stomach and whispered, Your story begins with your mother's victory. The Langston dynasty had bet she would cry. Instead, she'd given them something to weep about for generations. Chapter 2. The Hidden Heir. The call came at midnight, 3 days after Christmas, when the truth had finally settled into Marcus Langston's bones like winter cold that no fire could warm. Amara stood on the terrace of her new penthouse, 40 floors above Central Park, purchased under her maiden name 6 months ago, watching the city lights blur through the falling snow. The phone rang with the persistence of desperation. She let it ring 7 times before answering. You knew about the twins from the beginning. Marcus's voice was stripped of its usual polish. You knew, and you let me throw it all away. I knew many things, Amara replied, her voice carrying the warmth she'd never waste on him again. I knew about your Tuesday meetings with Vanessa at the Carlisle. I knew about the Zurich account you thought was hidden. I knew your mother spent $50,000 trying to investigate my background, hoping to find something that would justify her hatred. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see her reflection, not the diminished woman they'd tried to create, but the phoenix that had risen from their ashes. The pregnancy suited her, adding a glow that no amount of Vivian's expensive facial treatments had ever achieved. My family wants to meet, Marcus said, the words dragging from him like a confession from a guilty man. My mother, she hasn't slept since Christmas. The board is threatening to remove my father as chairman since the company sale went public. Amara moved inside, settling into the custom Italian leather chair she'd chosen for its perfect support. The penthouse was everything the Langston estate wasn't. Warm, vibrant, filled with art from black artists whose work Vivian had called too political for their walls. Your mother, Amara said slowly, savoring each word, once told me I should be grateful you chose me despite my obvious deficiencies. She suggested I take hormone treatments to ensure any children would have good hair. She hired a speech coach to eliminate what she called my unfortunate Louisiana inflections. She's changed. Amara's laugh was rich, genuine. Has she? Or has she simply discovered that her grandchildren, the only Langston heirs, will be raised by the woman she spent 5 years trying to erase? The memory of her first family dinner with the Langstons remained vivid. She'd worn her best dress, carefully chosen to be conservative, yet elegant. Vivian had looked her over like livestock at auction, noting every perceived flaw. The conversation had been a minefield of coded insults and careful exclusions. They'd spoken about European vacations she'd never taken, boarding schools she'd never attended, people she'd never know. Your sister posted photos of me on her private Instagram, Amara continued. She called me Marcus's charity case and made bets with her friends about how long I'd last. Your father suggested I stop practicing law because it was unseemly for a Langston wife to work. Every day for 5 years, your family made it clear I was temporary. She heard Marcus's breathing, ragged and desperate. Behind him, she could make out Vivian's voice, sharp and demanding. Ask her about the children. Ask her what she wants. What I wanted, Amara said, rising to pour herself a glass of sparkling pear juice from the baccarat decanter, was a family. What I wanted was to use my law degree to help your company navigate its legal challenges. What I wanted was to raise children who knew both sides of their heritage, but you all made it clear that what I wanted was irrelevant. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Langstons, who'd spent generations building their empire on the backs of others' labor, now found themselves begging for scraps from someone they'd considered beneath them. The twins, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. Do you know what they are? Boys, girls? One of each, Amara replied. Perfect in every way. They'll have my last name, of course, Johnson. They'll know their history. All of it. The Louisiana roots your mother found so distasteful. The ancestors who survived what yours inflicted. The strength that comes from struggle, not inheritance. She moved to her home office, where the walls displayed her achievements. Her Howard Law degree, her civil rights commendations, the photos from her time defending those who couldn't afford justice, all the things she'd packed away when she'd married Marcus, thinking love required sacrifice. I loved you, Marcus said suddenly. Whatever you think, I did love you. You loved the idea of me, Amara corrected. The beautiful black wife who made you seem progressive. The brilliant attorney who could fix your problems. The fertile woman who could give you heirs. But you never loved me enough to defend me when your mother called me urban at the country club. You never loved me enough to leave the bed you shared with Vanessa to attend my father's funeral. Isaiah Johnson had died alone in a Louisiana hospital while Marcus was in the Hamptons with his mistress. Amara had held her father's hand as he passed, promising him she wouldn't let them break her. That was the moment she'd begun planning. Jasper Thornton wants to meet with my father, Marcus said, changing tactics. He's demanding Clarence step down from all his board positions. He says you have documents proving your father's insider trading, his discriminatory hiring practices, the bribes to city officials. Amara smiled. Yes, I have those. Your family was so confident in my ignorance. You left everything accessible, every password saved, every document unguarded. You discussed crimes at dinner while I sat silent, assuming I didn't understand. The sound of glass breaking came through the phone, Clarence's rage finally finding physical expression. She heard Vivian's voice rise. This is extortion. We'll sue her for everything. On what grounds? Amara asked, knowing they could hear her. Everything I did was legal. Every transfer properly documented. Every sale legitimate. Your prenuptial agreement, the one designed to leave me with nothing, actually protected my separate assets. The joke, as they say, is on you. She pulled up the ultrasound image on her tablet, studying the 2 tiny hearts beating in perfect rhythm. These children would never know the crushing weight of conditional love. They would never sit at a table where their very existence was tolerated rather than celebrated. There must be something you want, Marcus said desperately. Some arrangement we can make visitation rights, perhaps shared custody. My mother is prepared to apologize. Your mother is prepared to lie, Amara interrupted. Just as she lied when she smiled at our wedding while telling her friends she gave us 2 years maximum. Just as she lied when she said she'd love any grandchildren we had, while secretly praying they'd inherit more Langston than Johnson features, she opened another document on her computer, the trust fund she'd established for the twins, funded by the company sale. They would want for nothing, but more importantly, they would owe nothing to anyone. Sophia needs this. Marcus tried again. She's being shunned by society. The embarrassment of what's happened. People are laughing at her. She's lost her position at the Met Gala committee. The same position she used to ensure I was never invited despite my donations? Amara asked. How unfortunate for her. The penthouse's smart system announced a visitor, her attorney, Ezekiel Harrington, arriving for their evening meeting. Unlike the Langston family lawyer, who treated her like furniture during the prenuptial negotiations, Ezekiel respected her intellect and had helped craft her perfect revenge. I have to go, Amara said. My actual family is arriving tomorrow. My mother, my aunts, my cousins, the people your family banned from our wedding reception because they might misunderstand the tone of the event. Amara, please. The children will be born in July, she said, her tone final. You'll receive notification through proper legal channels. Any attempts to circumvent the custody agreement will result in the release of certain recordings from your family dinners. I believe Vivian's thoughts on breeding and racial purity would make fascinating headlines. You recorded us? Every moment, Amara confirmed. Every slur disguised as concern. Every insult wrapped in silk. Every time you sat silent. While they diminished me. She paused, looking at a photo on her desk herself as a child with her father, both beaming with joy at a church picnic in Louisiana. Isaiah Johnson had been a janitor, but he'd carried himself with more dignity than Clarence Langston ever possessed with all his millions. Do you want to know the real tragedy, Marcus? Amara asked softly. If your family had accepted me, truly accepted me, I would have helped you build an empire that mattered. I would have used my legal expertise to make your business bulletproof, legally and ethically. These twins would have united two worlds, creating something beautiful from both heritages. But your family's hatred was stronger than their greed, their prejudice deeper than their desire for legacy. We were fools, Marcus whispered, and for the first time, he sounded like he might actually understand. No, Amara corrected. You were exactly who you were raised to be. The difference is, now there are consequences. As she ended the call, Amara felt the twins move, a flutter of life that reminded her why she'd endured so much. These children would be born free, truly free from the golden chains the Langstons had tried to wrap around her. Tomorrow, Beatrice Johnson would arrive from Louisiana, bringing the warmth and wisdom the Langston estate had never possessed. They would set up the nursery together, filling it with colors and culture, love and laughter. Her mother would hang the quilt made by Amara's great-grandmother, a woman born into slavery who'd lived to see her great-grandchildren graduate from college. That quilt would mean more than all the designer nursery furniture the Langstons could have bought. The hidden heirs would remain hidden no more, but they would never be weapons in the Langstons' war for relevance. They would simply be children, loved and protected, raised by a woman who'd learned that sometimes the greatest victory comes from walking away with your dignity intact and their empire in ruins. Outside, New York glittered with promise. Somewhere in that maze of lights, the Langstons were discovering that their money couldn't buy what they'd lost. Their name couldn't command what they'd destroyed, and their legacy would be nothing but a cautionary tale about the price of prejudice. The twins moved again, stronger this time, as if declaring their own independence. Amara placed both hands on her belly, feeling their strength, their persistence, their refusal to be denied. You are already loved, she whispered to them. You are already powerful. You are already everything they feared you would be. And that, my precious ones, is why we've already won. Chapter 3. The Ironclad Preparation. 6 months before Christmas, when the Louisiana heat still clung to her skin from her father's funeral, Amara Johnson sat in a Manhattan law library at 3:00 the morning, building her war in silence. The funeral program lay beside her laptop. Isaiah Johnson, beloved father, community pillar, the man who taught her that dignity wasn't something anyone could take unless you handed it to them. Marcus hadn't come. He'd sent flowers with a card his secretary had signed, while he spent the weekend in the Hamptons with Vanessa Beaumont, not knowing that the hotel's security cameras had captured their every entrance and exit. That was the night Amara stopped being Mrs. Langston and remembered she was Amara Beatrice Johnson, summa cum laude from Howard Law. The woman who'd won Hawthorne versus State of New York at 27. The attorney who'd made powerful men tremble in courtrooms. Working late again? Jasper Thornton's voice had broken through her concentration. She'd looked up to find him standing in the doorway, his presence filling the space with the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. Jasper. She'd been surprised but not alarmed. They'd met at legal conferences before her marriage, when she was still someone instead of someone's wife. What brings you to the law library at this hour? The same thing that brings you, I imagine, he'd said, settling into the chair across from her with elegant precision, planning something that requires absolute discretion. She'd studied him, the man Marcus feared most, the competitor who'd built an empire without inherited wealth or connections, the businessman who'd never forgotten where he came from. Jasper Thornton had started with nothing but brilliance and determination, and now he owned half of Manhattan's most valuable commercial real estate. My condolences about your father, he'd said, and unlike the empty platitudes she'd received from the Langston circle, his sympathy carried weight. Isaiah Johnson was a good man. I remember when he came to my office, proud as could be, showing everyone your law school graduation photos. Tears she hadn't allowed herself at the funeral threatened to surface. You knew my father? He did maintenance in my building for 10 years, Jasper had replied. Never missed a day. Always talked about his brilliant daughter, who was going to change the world. The weight of that truth had settled on her shoulders. She'd given up everything for a man who couldn't even attend her father's funeral. What are you researching? Jasper had asked, glancing at her screen. She'd hesitated, then decided on honesty. Corporate asset transfer law, specifically how to legally transfer ownership of a company when you're the silent owner on paper. Jasper's eyes had sharpened with interest. Marcus doesn't know you own Langston Development Group. It wasn't a question. She'd nodded slowly. 3 years ago, during the federal investigation into their labor practices, Marcus needed someone with a clean record to hold the company assets. He was so confident I'd never understand what I was signing. But you did. I wrote my thesis on corporate ownership structures, she'd said with grim satisfaction. I knew exactly what those papers meant. I've been the legal owner for 3 years. While Marcus assumed it was just a formality, Jasper had leaned back, a smile playing at his lips that would have terrified anyone who knew what it meant. And now you want to sell to the right buyer, he'd confirmed. Someone who understands what it means to take everything from those who thought you were nothing. That night they'd begun planning. Jasper had brought in his team of lawyers, all brilliant, all discreet, all people who'd been underestimated by men like the Langstons. Together, they'd crafted a sale that was completely legal and utterly devastating. We'll need documentation of everything, Jasper's lead attorney, a woman named Zuri Okafor, had said during their second meeting. Every insult, every slight, every moment they revealed their true nature. Amara had pulled out her phone, showing them the app she'd installed. I've been recording for 2 months. Every dinner, every gathering, every private moment when they thought I wasn't listening. The recordings were damning. Vivian discussing her hope that any grandchildren would take after their father's side more. Clarence explaining to his golf buddies that Amara was articulate for her background. Sophia laughing with her friends about how she'd convinced the charity board that Amara wouldn't be a good fit for their committee. But the most damaging recording was Marcus himself, drunk at his bachelor party, a recording that Sophia had shared, explaining how marrying Amara was good optics for the company's diversity issues. This is gold, Zuri had said. But we need more than just personal grievances. We need financial leverage. That's when Amara had revealed her second weapon. I have access to everything, every account, every transaction, every deal they've ever made. They conduct business in front of me like I'm furniture. Over the following weeks, she documented everything. Clarence's insider trading conducted through offshore accounts he accessed from his home computer. Vivian's embezzlement from the charity she chaired, hidden in expenditures for administrative costs. Sophia's tax evasion, routing her trust fund through shell companies to avoid payment. They're criminals, Jasper had said simply when presented with the evidence. Wealthy, protected criminals. But criminals nonetheless. Which is why this needs to be perfect, Amara had replied. One mistake, and they'll use their connections to destroy me. She'd spent hours in that library crafting documents that were works of legal art. The sale agreement with Jasper included clauses that prevented any reversal, no matter what the Langstons tried. The custody arrangements she'd filed secretly were ironclad, based on Marcus's documented abandonment and the family's recorded hostility. The most beautiful piece was the prenuptial agreement itself. The Langstons' lawyer had been so focused on protecting Marcus's visible assets that they'd ignored the clause about separate property acquired during marriage. Every purchase Amara had made, every investment in her own name, was protected. You've thought of everything, Jasper had said one night, reviewing the final documents. Not everything, she'd replied. I didn't think about what happens after. When they realize what I've done, that's when you'll need allies, he'd said. The kind of people who understand that money isn't power. Knowledge and preparation are power. He'd introduced her to a network she'd never known existed. Successful black professionals who'd been shut out of the Langston circle, Latino executives who'd been passed over for promotions at Clarence's firms, Asian investors who'd been excluded from the old boys club, all of them eager to see the Langston empire fall. We've been waiting for someone like you, a tech entrepreneur named Hiroshi Yamamoto had told her, someone with inside access and the courage to use it. They'd helped her set up her new life, the penthouse purchased through a trust that couldn't be traced, the medical care from doctors who wouldn't report to the Langstons, the security team that would protect her when everything came to light. But the masterstroke had been the timing. She'd discovered her pregnancy the day after her father's funeral. Twins, the ultimate irony. The heirs the Langstons had been pressuring her to produce for years, arriving just as she was leaving. You could have left quietly, Zuri had said one day, taken a settlement and disappeared. Why do this? Amara had thought of her father dying while she sat at Vivian's garden party pretending to care about flower arrangements. She'd thought of every young woman who'd been told she should be grateful for crumbs from tables she'd helped build. Because they need to know how it feels, she'd said, to have everything taken by someone you never considered a threat. The preparation had been meticulous. Every document notarized, every recording backed up in multiple locations, every contingency planned for. She'd even arranged for the Christmas morning confrontation, knowing the family would all be together, their arrogance at its peak. You're going to war, Jasper had observed the night before Christmas Eve. No, Amara had corrected. The war is over. They just don't know they've already lost. Now, sitting in her penthouse office, reviewing the messages from Marcus's lawyers trying to find any weakness in her plan, Amara smiled. They would find nothing because there was nothing to find. 6 months of preparation had built a fortress they couldn't breach. The twins moved within her, and she placed her hand on her stomach. Your mother is many things, she whispered to them, but she is never unprepared. The phone rang another lawyer, another desperate attempt to undo what couldn't be undone. She let it go to voicemail. The time for conversation was over. Now was the time to watch an empire fall, one perfectly legal document at a time. Chapter 4. The family's first plea. Vivian Whitmore Langston had never begged for anything in her 71 years of privilege, but desperation drove her to Amara's penthouse on a cold January morning, pride crumbling like ancient parchment. The doorman hadn't recognized her name. That was the first humiliation, having to explain who she was to someone who would have once scrambled to open doors for her. The second was waiting in the lobby, while security confirmed her appointment. Sitting on a bench like any common visitor while residents passed by, some recognizing her and whispering behind manicured hands. When the private elevator finally opened to Amara's floor, Vivian found herself in a space that defied everything she'd expected. Not the gaudy new, money excess she'd imagined, but understated elegance with African art adorning the walls. Louisiana photographers' work capturing the beauty Vivian had always dismissed as quaint. Amara stood by the windows, dressed in winter-white cashmere that emphasized her pregnancy's glow. She didn't turn when Vivian entered, making the older woman wait like a supplicant at court. You came alone, Amara finally said, her voice carrying the authority Vivian had once claimed as her own birthright. I expected Clarence to accompany you. He usually handles the family's difficulties. Clarence is meeting with bankruptcy attorneys, Vivian said, the words bitter as wormwood. Jasper Thornton is systematically destroying every partnership my husband built over 40 years. Amara turned then, and Vivian saw something she'd never noticed in 5 years. The steel beneath the silk. This wasn't the woman who'd sat silently through family dinners. This was the attorney who'd graduated at the top of her class, who'd won cases against impossible odds, who'd played a longer game than any of them had imagined. "Please sit," Amara said, gesturing to a chair that probably cost more than Vivian's monthly mortgage on the estate they might lose. "Can I offer you tea? I have a lovely rooibos from South Africa. Or perhaps you'd prefer the Darjeeling you always said was the only civilized choice." The mockery was subtle but cutting. Vivian sat, her Chanel suit feeling like armor made of paper. "I came to discuss the children." "My children," Amara corrected, settling into her own chair with the grace of someone who'd learned that power wasn't inherited, but earned. "The ones you called unfortunate necessities at last year's Memorial Day gathering." Vivian's face flushed. She'd forgotten about the recordings, the constant surveillance she'd never suspected from someone she'd considered barely worthy of notice. "I've had time to think," Vivian began, her prepared speech already faltering. "Perhaps I was harsh in my assessments." Amara's laugh was rich, genuine, devastating. "Harsh? Is that what we're calling it? You hired a private investigator to prove I was after Marcus's money. You suggested I have cosmetic surgery to refine my features. You told the admissions board at Peyton Prep that any children we had would need special consideration due to their mixed heritage." Each word was a dagger precisely placed. Vivian's hands trembled as she reached for her purse, pulling out an envelope she'd hoped would never see light. "I've written a letter," she said, offering it like a white flag. "A public apology. I'll send it to every society newsletter, every club, every board I've ever served on." Amara didn't take the envelope. Instead, she pulled up something on her tablet, turning it so Vivian could see. It was a video from 3 Christmases ago, Vivian holding court at her annual party, explaining to her circle why she'd seated Amara in the corner. "It's kindness, really. She's more comfortable with the help. They understand each other." "A letter," Amara said softly, "doesn't erase years of deliberate cruelty." Vivian's composure finally cracked. "What do you want? Money? We don't have any left. The estate, it's mortgaged to cover Marcus's debts. The family name, you've already destroyed it." "I want you to understand," Amara said, rising to walk to a shelf where photo albums sat. She pulled one out, opening it to reveal pictures Vivian had never seen. "This is my family. My grandmother, Beatrice, who raised 9 children after my grandfather was killed for trying to register to vote. My Aunt Delphine, who integrated the University of Alabama's nursing program. My cousin Jeremiah, who runs a legal aid clinic in New Orleans." She turned pages, each image a testament to strength Vivian had dismissed as insignificant. "These people, whom you banned from my wedding reception, have more dignity in their struggles than your family has in its entire genealogy. I understand you're angry." "Angry?" Amara's voice remained calm, which was somehow worse than shouting. "I'm not angry, Vivian. I'm victorious. There's a difference." She moved to another album, this one filled with accomplishments the Langstons had never acknowledged. "This is me arguing before the Supreme Court at 28. This is the scholarship fund I established before I met Marcus. This is the community center in Thibodaux that I funded with my own earnings, not Langston money." Vivian stared at the images, seeing for the first time the woman she'd spent 5 years trying to diminish. "You know what the real tragedy is, Vivian?" Amara continued, her voice taking on a reflective quality. "I would have been your greatest asset. I would have used my legal brilliance to protect your empire legitimately. I would have raised grandchildren who honored both their heritages equally. I would have brought fresh perspectives that could have evolved your legacy into something meaningful for the modern world." She paused at a particular photo, herself in her wedding dress, radiant with hope. "Look at this woman. She believed in the possibility of bridging worlds. She thought love could overcome prejudice. She was willing to sacrifice everything for acceptance that would never come. You assumed I was nothing because I didn't come from your world," Amara continued. "You never wondered why a brilliant attorney would give up her career. You never questioned why someone with my credentials would tolerate your treatment. You saw what you wanted to see, a gold digger who got lucky." "Then why?" Vivian asked. desperation cracking her voice. "Why did you stay?" "Because I loved him," Amara said simply. "I loved Marcus with the kind of devotion you claimed I wasn't capable of feeling. I thought if I proved myself worthy by your standards, you'd accept me. I thought if I gave you grandchildren, you'd finally see me as family." She touched her stomach, where the twins moved constantly now. "But you taught me something valuable, Vivian. You taught me that there's no amount of excellence that makes you worthy in the eyes of those determined to see you as less than. So I stopped trying to earn your approval and started documenting your decline." Vivian's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face paling further. "The country club, they've revoked our membership. Jasper's wife sits on the board now," Amara said casually. "Zuri Thornton, formerly Zuri Okafor, brilliant woman, Harvard Law, top of her class, the kind of woman you would have dismissed as a diversity hire, despite her being infinitely more qualified than anyone in your circle. Turns out, they've been looking for an excuse to remove you for years. Your comments about the new Saudi members were the final straw. You're destroying everything my family built over generations." "No," Amara corrected. "I'm revealing what your family always was. The difference is now everyone else can see it too." Vivian stood on shaking legs, her last card unplayed. "The children, my grandchildren, they'll need their heritage. Both sides of it. You can't deny them their birthright out of spite." "Their birthright?" Amara walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Their birthright is strength earned through struggle, not privilege inherited through accident. Their birthright is the knowledge that their mother stood up to injustice, not the shame of a family that perpetuated it. They'll have questions one day about why they never knew us. And I'll answer them honestly," Amara replied. "I'll show them these recordings. I'll explain how their grandmother thought their black heritage was something to be bred out. I'll tell them how their grandfather built his fortune on discriminatory practices. I'll make sure they understand exactly why I protected them from you." Vivian made one last desperate play. "I could fight for grandparents' rights." "The courts would love to hear these recordings," Amara finished, "especially the one from last Easter, where you explained your theory about genetic dilution and why you hoped any children would be light enough to pass." The defeat in Vivian's eyes was complete. She moved toward the elevator, then turned back. "You were never what we thought you were." "No," Amara agreed. "I was always more. You just couldn't see it through your prejudice. And that blindness, Vivian, that willful refusal to see my humanity, my brilliance, my worth, that's what destroyed your family, not me. Your own hatred consumed you from within." As the elevator doors closed on Vivian Whitmore Langston, Amara felt the twins respond to her elevated heartbeat. She placed both hands on her stomach, soothing them. "Your grandmother came today," she whispered to them, "the one who will never teach you that your worth depends on your proximity to whiteness, the one who will never make you feel like guests at your own family table, the one who will never know the brilliant, beautiful souls you're going to become." Her phone lit up with messages, Jasper confirming that Clarence's last business partner had withdrawn support, Ezekiel noting that Vivian's charity was under investigation, Zuri reporting that Sophia's trust fund had been frozen, pending tax fraud charges. But the message that mattered most came from her mother in Louisiana. "The nursery is ready, baby. Your real family can't wait to meet those precious ones." Vivian's plea had failed, as Amara had known it would. You couldn't apologize for systematic cruelty with a letter. You couldn't undo generations of racism with reluctant regret. And you certainly couldn't claim grandchildren you'd already rejected before they were even born. The first plea was over. Others would come: Clarence with his threats, Sophia with her tears, Marcus with his promises, but they would all fail for the same reason Vivian had failed. They still thought this was about revenge. They couldn't understand it was about justice. Chapter 5. The business crumbles. Clarence Langston stood in what used to be his corner office at Langston Development Group, watching Jasper Thornton's team remove his personal effects with surgical precision, each item catalogued like evidence at a crime scene. The nameplate that had adorned his desk for 30 years went into a box marked former management. The oil painting of his father, Clarence Sr., was wrapped in brown paper like a corpse in a shroud. The golf trophies, the photos with senators and governors, the symbols of a lifetime's accumulated power, all reduced to cardboard boxes on a dolly. "You have 1 hour to vacate," Jasper Thornton said from the doorway, his presence filling the space that Clarence had once commanded. "Security will escort you out if necessary." Clarence turned, his face mottled with rage and humiliation. "This is theft." "My lawyers have already confirmed the sale was legal," Jasper interrupted, his voice smooth as aged whiskey and twice as potent. "Your daughter-in-law was remarkably thorough. Every document properly filed, every transfer legitimately executed. You should have read what your son was signing." The irony burned like acid. Clarence, who'd built an empire on exploiting legal loopholes and technical interpretations, was being destroyed by the very precision he'd once weaponized against others. "She planned this," Clarence said, his voice breaking. "That woman planned this from the beginning." "That woman," Jasper said, stepping into the office, "has a name. Amara Johnson. And no, she didn't plan this from the beginning. She planned this from the moment you people showed her who you really were." Jasper moved to the window, looking out at the view Clarence had treasured. Manhattan spread below like a conquered kingdom. "Do you know what she told me when we first discussed this sale? She said she would have been the best thing that ever happened to your family if you'd let her. She would have used her legal brilliance to protect your empire, raised children who honored both their heritages, brought fresh perspective to your stale dynasty. She was never one of us." "No," Jasper agreed. "She was better. And you were too blind with prejudice to see it." Clarence's phone buzzed. Augustus Wentworth, his oldest business partner, the man who'd been best man at his wedding. He answered desperately. "Augustus, thank God. I need you to call an emergency board meeting. I'm calling to inform you that Wentworth Industries is severing all ties with you, effective immediately." Augustus's voice was cold, formal. "The recordings your daughter-in-law released to the board. Clarence, we can't be associated with someone who used those terms about our Jewish investors." The line went dead. Clarence stared at the phone, then at Jasper, who smiled with satisfied knowledge. "She gave us everything," Jasper said. "Every racist comment you made about your Middle Eastern partners, every sexist remark about female executives, every moment you revealed that your success was built not on merit, but on maintaining a system that excluded anyone who didn't look like you." "Business is business," Clarence tried weakly. "Those were private conversations. In your home, with your wife and children present, while Amara sat silent and recorded every word, Jasper finished. You discussed insider trading over dinner. You planned discriminatory hiring practices over brandy. You committed crimes while she sat there, invisible to you, documenting everything." Another buzz. Theodore Carver this time. Clarence didn't answer, already knowing what the message would say. The empire he'd spent 40 years building was collapsing in 40 days. "Your son came here yesterday," Jasper said conversationally. "Tried to convince me to sell back, offered me double what I paid." Clarence's hope flickered. "And I laughed," Jasper said simply. "Then I showed him the renovation plans. We're turning the executive floor into a scholarship center for Black and brown law students. The conference room where you held your all-white board meetings will be renamed the Amara Johnson Justice Center." The cruelty of it was exquisite. Everything Clarence had built to exclude would now be used to include. Every space he'd used to maintain power would become a monument to his downfall. "There must be something," Clarence said, his voice desperate now. "Some deal we can make. You're a businessman, Jasper. Everything has a price." Jasper pulled out his phone, showing Clarence a photo. It was Amara, radiant in her pregnancy, surrounded by young black women at a legal clinic. "She's funding 50 full scholarships to Howard Law. Your former clients are lining up to support her foundation. She's becoming everything you feared, powerful, influential, and completely beyond your reach." Clarence sank into his chair. Not his chair anymore. Jasper's chair now. "The twins. She's carrying my grandchildren." "She's carrying her children," Jasper corrected. "Children who will be raised to understand their full history, including how their grandfather built his fortune on redlining, discriminatory lending, and systematic exclusion of minorities from economic opportunity." "That's not true." Jasper pulled out a tablet, showing scanned documents. "These are your company's original lending policies from the 1962nd, explicitly stating that loans to colored neighborhoods should be denied or given at predatory rates, policies that were never formally changed, just hidden better." Clarence's face went ashen. "How did you get those?" Amara found them in your home safe, Jasper said. The combination was your wedding anniversary. She said you never changed it because you never thought she was smart enough to try. The final humiliation came in the form of Sophia, who burst through the door, mascara running, designer dress wrinkled. Daddy, they've frozen my accounts. The IRS says I owe millions in back taxes. They say Amara gave them. She stopped, seeing Jasper, her face contorting with rage. You're helping that woman destroy us. That woman, Jasper said calmly, is destroying you all by herself. I'm just buying the pieces. Sophia turned to her father. Do something. You always fix everything. But Clarence had nothing left to fix with. His connections were abandoning him, like rats from a sinking ship. His wealth was evaporating. His reputation was destroyed. The tools he'd used to build his empire, intimidation, exclusion, exploitation, were useless against someone who documented every crime and planned every countermove. She gave us a chance, Jasper said, preparing to leave, that Christmas morning when she revealed the pregnancy. If you'd apologized then, genuinely apologized and changed, she might have shown mercy, but you chose to threaten her instead. Clarence, you sent lawyers after a pregnant woman. Vivian tried manipulation. Sophia posted those photos on Instagram, calling Amara a breeding mare who finally did something useful. Sophia gasped. How did you? She screenshot everything. Jasper said, every post, every message, every moment. You revealed your true nature. Security arrived, not the old security who'd worked for Clarence, but Jasper's team. Time's up, the lead officer said. As Clarence was escorted from his office, he passed the portraits of previous Langston presidents, his father, his grandfather, the line of men who'd built their success on others' exclusion. Soon, those portraits would be gone, replaced by images of the diverse leaders Jasper was bringing in. Tell Amara. Clarence started. Tell her yourself, Jasper said, though I doubt she'll answer. She's busy building something better from your ashes. Outside the building that bore his name, not for much longer, Clarence stood on the sidewalk like any other terminated employee. His driver was gone, the car repossessed. His credit cards were maxed out, fighting legal battles he couldn't win. His phone buzzed with messages from journalists wanting statements about the discrimination lawsuits being filed by former employees, emboldened by Amara's revelations. A taxi stopped, and through the window, he saw Amara in the back seat. She looked at him, her expression neither cruel nor sympathetic. Just resolved, she placed a hand on her pregnant belly, a gesture of protection and promise. Then the taxi pulled away, leaving Clarence standing in the cold, finally understanding what it felt like to be excluded from a world he'd once ruled. The business hadn't just crumbled. It had been deliberately demolished, brick by brick, by someone he'd never considered capable of holding a hammer. Chapter 6. The Medical Crisis. The pain started at 3:00 the morning, sharp enough to pull Amara from sleep, her hands instinctively moving to protect the twins as she reached for her phone with trembling fingers. By the time the ambulance arrived at Mount Sinai's private entrance, the news had somehow already reached the Langstons. Marcus stood in the emergency room, disheveled and desperate, trying to convince the security that he was still her husband, still had rights. I'm sorry, sir, the guard said firmly. You're not on the approved list. Amara could hear his protests as they wheeled her past, but her focus was entirely on the two lives inside her, the rhythmic monitors tracking their heartbeats like a prayer she couldn't stop whispering. Doctor. Nia Adebayo appeared, her presence immediately calming. Amara, we're going to take excellent care of you and the babies. You're experiencing preterm contractions, but we can manage this. Through the glass doors of her private room, Amara saw them gathering. Marcus arguing with administrators, Vivian on her phone with someone she claimed was the best specialist in Manhattan, Clarence threatening legal action if he wasn't given information. Should I have security remove them? Dr. Adebayo asked, her voice gentle but protective. No, Amara said, breathing through another contraction. Let them stay in the waiting room. Let them understand what it feels like to be powerless when someone is in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on her. When she'd miscarried 2 years ago, a loss the Langstons had never known about because Marcus had been in Tokyo with Vanessa, she'd driven herself to the hospital, sat alone in a public waiting room, and grieved in silence. Vivian had actually called during it, demanding to know why Amara had missed the charity luncheon. "Mrs. Johnson," a new voice interrupted. It was Dr. Everett Prescott, the Langstons' family physician, the man who'd once suggested her urban diet might affect her fertility. "I've been asked to consult on your case." "By whom?" Dr. Adebayo's voice carried professional ice. "The family has concerns." "They're not my family anymore," Amara said firmly, "despite the pain. And you're not my doctor. You haven't been since you prescribed anxiety medication instead of running tests when I complained of chronic pain that turned out to be endometriosis." "Doctor," Prescott's face flushed, "I'm only trying to help. The way you helped when you told Vivian my pregnancy would be high risk because of what you called genetic incompatibilities?" Amara asked. "The way you helped when you suggested I consider using a surrogate because my body might not be suited for carrying Langston heirs. Please leave." As he retreated, Ezekiel Harrington arrived, her lawyer looking impeccable despite the early hour. "They're trying to get a court order," he said quietly, "claiming that as the biological father, Marcus has the right to make medical decisions if you're incapacitated." "I'm not incapacitated," Amara said clearly, though another contraction made her grip the bed rails. "I'm in preterm labor, fully conscious, and legally divorced as of yesterday, when the expedited decree came through. The divorce is final." The voice from the doorway was Marcus's. He'd somehow gotten past security, looking haggard, his usual polish completely gone. "Amara, please. They're my children, too." "Doctor." Adebayo moved to remove him, but Amara raised her hand. "Let him say what he came to say." Marcus approached slowly, as if she were a wounded animal that might flee. "I know I failed you. I know I was a coward, but those babies are babies. They're innocent in all this. If something happens—" "Something is happening," Amara said. "I'm in preterm labor at 28 weeks because of the stress your family has put me through, the constant legal threats, the harassment, the attempts to have me declared mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs." Through the window, she could see Vivian pacing, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling every society doctor she knew, trying to find one who would override Amara's choices. "I never wanted it to go this far," Marcus said weakly. "No," Amara agreed. "You just wanted a quiet divorce where I disappeared with a small settlement while you married Vanessa and had children you could acknowledge publicly. You wanted me to be grateful for the scraps of our marriage while you kept the feast." Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Dr. Adebayo checked the monitors, her expression concerned but controlled. "We need to administer medication to stop the contractions. The steroids for the baby's lungs are already working. But we need to buy more time." "Whatever they need," Amara said, then looked at Marcus. "You should go." "I could." "What?" Amara interrupted. "Hold my hand the way you did when my father died? Stand by my side the way you did when your mother called me breeding stock at Thanksgiving? Fight for me the way you did when your sister spread rumors that I trapped you with a pregnancy?" Marcus's face crumbled. Behind him, Clarence appeared. His usual commanding presence diminished. "We have rights." "You have nothing," Ezekiel interrupted. "Producing documents. The court has already ruled on your emergency petition. Given the documented history of emotional abuse and the stress it's causing my client's pregnancy, you're ordered to maintain a 500-foot distance unless explicitly invited. These are our grandchildren." Vivian had finally made it past security, her voice shrill with desperation. "You can't keep us from our grandchildren." Amara looked at the woman who'd made her feel small for 5 years, who'd questioned her worth at every opportunity, who'd suggested she was lucky to be allowed into their family. Vivian looked older, diminished, her carefully maintained facade cracking like cheap foundation. "These are my children," Amara said quietly but firmly. "They will be born into love, not obligation. They will know their worth from their first breath, not spend their lives trying to earn it from people who see their blackness as a deficiency to be overcome." The medication was working. The contractions were slowing, spacing out. The twins' heartbeats remained strong on the monitor, two fighters, like their mother. "I could have loved you," Amara said, looking at each of them. "I wanted to love you. I came into your family with so much hope, so much willingness to bridge our worlds, But you saw my love as weakness, my culture as less than, my presence as temporary. Sophia arrived last, breathless and dramatic as always. The media is outside. They're saying you've banned us from seeing the babies. The optics are terrible. The optics? Amara laughed, though it hurt. Of course, that's your concern, not the baby's health, not my well-being, but how this looks to your social circle. She struggled to sit up more, despite Dr. Adebayo's gentle, restraining hand. Let me tell you about optics, Sophia. The optics of you posting photos from my baby shower, the one I wasn't invited to plan, mocking the gifts my Louisiana family sent. The optics of you telling your followers that I was finally useful after 5 years of marriage. The optics of you suggesting I should be grateful Marcus didn't leave me sooner. Those were private posts. Nothing is private in the digital age, Amara said. Just like nothing was private when you live-streamed my miscarriage aftermath, when I came to that family dinner, still bleeding, still grieving, and you complained that I wasn't being festive enough for your Instagram stories. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors. The Langstons stood frozen, perhaps finally understanding the depth of their cruelty. Dr. Adebayo stepped forward. Everyone needs to leave now. My patient needs rest. As security began escorting them out, Vivian turned back. We'll fight this. We have resources. You have debt, Amara corrected. Mountains of it. All coming due now that Jasper owns your assets. You have legal bills you can't pay and criminal investigations you can't stop. You have nothing left to fight with except pride. And pride doesn't pay lawyers. This isn't over, Clarence said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's been over since Christmas morning, Amara replied. You just didn't know it yet. The room emptied except for Ezekiel and Dr. Adebayo. The crisis was passing. The twins were safe, but the emotional toll weighed heavy. Amara touched her stomach, feeling the movement within. Life persisting despite everything. Your mother is here, Ezekiel said gently. She flew in from Louisiana. Should I send her in? Amara nodded, tears finally coming. When Beatrice Johnson entered, bringing the scent of home and unconditional love, Amara broke down completely. My brave girl, her mother whispered, holding her carefully. My brilliant, brave girl. You don't have to be strong right now. I've got you, Mama. Amara sobbed. They stood right there and acted like they had rights to my babies. After everything they did, everything they said, they still think they're entitled to my children. Baby, Beatrice said, stroking her daughter's hair. People like that think they're entitled to everything. But entitlement ain't the same as deserving, and they don't deserve nothing from you or these precious babies. Through the window, Amara could see the Langstons being escorted out by security. They looked small, ordinary, stripped of the power they'd wielded so carelessly. They would go home to their crumbling estate and their empty legacy, while she would bring life into the world, life they would never poison with their prejudice. You know what your daddy would say? Beatrice asked softly. He'd say you're like that magnolia tree in our backyard. Storms come, winds blow, but you bend without breaking. And when the storm passes, you bloom even more beautiful than before. The twins moved, responding to their grandmother's voice, and Amara felt peace wash over her. These babies would know this voice, this love, this unconditional acceptance from their first breath. The nurses told me what happened, Beatrice continued. How they tried to force their way in, how that fool doctor tried to take over. Baby, you stood your ground even in labor. That's the kind of strength them babies gonna inherit, not the Langston name or money, but the Johnson strength, the kind that can't be bought or stolen. Dr. Adebayo returned with positive news. The contractions have stopped completely. The babies are stable. You'll need to stay for observation, but I believe we've avoided early delivery. As night fell over Manhattan, Amara lay in her hospital bed, her mother in the chair beside her, and felt the profound difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose. The Langstons had shown their true nature in her moment of vulnerability. Still grasping, still demanding, still believing their wants superseded her needs. But tomorrow, her chosen family would fill this room. Jasper and his wife would come with flowers. Her cousins would arrive with Louisiana cooking smuggled past hospital security. Her aunts would circle her with prayers and protection. The twins would be surrounded by love that demanded nothing but their existence. The medical crisis had passed, but it had revealed everything. In her moment of greatest vulnerability, the Langstons had thought only of their rights, their image, their desires. They had proven, finally and completely, that they deserved no place in her children's lives. The twins would be born early but strong. They would know struggle, but also triumph. They would understand that family isn't about blood or names or inherited wealth, but about who shows up when you're broken and helps you heal. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to the drama in this room. But inside, a mother protected her unborn children from a legacy of poison, choosing instead to give them a heritage of strength, love, and unshakable dignity. Chapter 7. The Social Destruction. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where 300 of New York's elite gathered in their finest to celebrate philanthropy while practicing hypocrisy. Amara entered through the main doors like a queen returning from exile, wearing a custom gown by Celeste James that celebrated her pregnancy with elegant draping. The black designer had insisted on dressing her for free, calling it an honor to dress a woman who's rewriting the rules. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused at lips. The entire room turned to watch her descent down the grand staircase, Jasper Thornton at her side in perfectly tailored Oswald Boateng, their combined presence announcing a new order. "Breathe," Jasper murmured, his hand steady at her elbow. "Let them look. Let them see what power actually looks like." Vivian stood near the donation display, frozen beside a photograph of herself as foundation president, a title she'd held for 2 decades. Her face cycled through emotions: shock, rage, humiliation, and finally, desperate calculation. "Ladies and gentlemen, the foundation's new president, Priya Patel, announced from the podium, please welcome our diamond sponsor for this evening, Miss Amara Johnson, whose generous donation will fund our new initiative, providing legal aid to women escaping domestic abuse." The applause was scattered at first, then grew as people recognized the strategic importance of aligning with the woman who'd brought down the Langstons. Amara moved through the crowd, greeting the same people who'd once treated her as invisible. "Amara, darling." Penelope air-kissed her cheeks, the same woman who'd once asked if she was the help at a garden party. "You look absolutely radiant. Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you, Penelope. I remember you said pregnancy would ruin my figure at last year's gala. How perspectives change." The older woman's face tightened, but she forced a laugh. "Did I? How foolish of me." Amara moved on, each interaction a masterclass in polite devastation. She didn't need to be cruel. The truth was weapon enough. Clarence approached, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. "This is inappropriate. You shouldn't be here in your condition." "My condition?" Amara smiled. "You mean pregnant with the heirs you spent years demanding? Or do you mean my condition as the owner of what used to be your empire? The foundation was built on Langston money. Built on redlining profits and discriminatory lending," Amara corrected, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I have the documents, Clarence. Every illegal practice, every bribe, every violation. Should we discuss them here, or would you prefer I save them for the FBI?" He retreated, his face ashen. Across the room, Sophia held court with her usual circle, but the women were distinctly cool, their body language expressing the social distance that had opened between them and the disgraced family. "Did you see?" one of them said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Vanessa Beaumont was arrested yesterday, tax evasion and fraud. They say Amara provided the evidence." Sophia's wineglass shook. She'd been Vanessa's biggest defender, had facilitated the affair, had laughed about it at brunches. Amara was never invited to attend. The evening's program began, and Amara took her place at the head table, the seat that had always been Vivian's. The older woman was relegated to the back, at a table partially obscured by a pillar, sitting with other fallen social climbers who'd lost their positions through scandal or bankruptcy. "Before we begin," Priya said from the podium, "I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, or should I say the absence of an elephant." Vivian Whitmore Langston's resignation from the board was accepted last week, following revelations of embezzlement and misuse of foundation funds. Gasps rippled through the room. Vivian's theft had been an open secret, but having it announced publicly was social execution. However, Priya continued, thanks to Miss Johnson's forensic accounting skills and generous personal donation, we've recovered the missing funds and can continue our mission without interruption. The applause was thunderous. Amara stood, acknowledging it with grace, then moved to the podium herself. I want to announce a new initiative, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. The Johnson Foundation for Economic Justice will provide full scholarships to Howard Law School for 50 students annually, specifically focusing on those from communities historically excluded from legal education. She looked directly at Vivian as she continued, for too long, certain families have hoarded opportunity, using their privilege to maintain systems that exclude others. That ends now. Furthermore, Amara continued, we'll be partnering with Jasper Thornton's enterprise to convert properties previously used for discriminatory practices into community legal centers. The first will be in the building that once housed Langston Development Group. Marcus stood abruptly from his table. He'd only been allowed in as someone's +1, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. You can't, I can, and I have, Amara said calmly. Every building your family used to deny mortgages to black families will now serve those communities. Every office where your father planned redlining strategies will become a classroom for future civil rights lawyers. The room was silent, watching the public demolition of a dynasty. This wasn't just business, it was personal, political, and perfectly legal. I also want to address the whispers I've been hearing all evening, Amara continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. Yes, I recorded the Langstons every dinner where they discussed their superiority while I served them food, every gathering where they mocked my heritage while I stood silent, every moment they revealed their true nature while assuming I was too stupid to understand. She pulled out her phone, holding it up. This device captured truth, not revenge, not spite, but truth. And if any of you are worried about your own past interactions with me, perhaps you should reflect on why that concerns you. One more announcement, Amara said, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. My children will be born this summer. They will carry the Johnson name exclusively. They will know their full history, the Louisiana roots that run deep and strong, the ancestors who survived what others' ancestors inflicted. They will be raised with the values the Langstons claim to possess but never demonstrated: integrity, compassion, and justice. She stepped down from the podium to thunderous applause. But she wasn't finished. She walked directly to Vivian's table, every eye in the room following. You wanted me to be grateful, she said quietly, but in the silence, everyone could hear. Grateful for your tolerance, your condescension, your crumbs. Instead, I'm grateful for your cruelty. It taught me my own strength. It showed me who you really are, and it gave me the motivation to dismantle everything you built on others' exclusion. Vivian's composure finally shattered. You vindictive little careful, Amara warned. Everyone's recording. Your words will be on social media within minutes, although I suppose your reputation can't sink much lower. She turned to address the room one final time. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. For those who shunned me when I was Mrs. Langston, your sudden friendship now is noted and declined. For those who stood by and watched the Langstons' treatment of me, your silence was complicity. But for those few who showed kindness when it wasn't advantageous, you know who you are. Thank you. As she walked toward the exit, people parted like the Red Sea. Some reached out, trying to touch her to claim association with her victory. She ignored them all except for one, a young black woman who'd been a server at Langston events, who'd once slipped her a tissue when Vivian's cruelty had brought tears. Thank you, Elena, Amara said, embracing her. The foundation will be in touch about law school scholarships. Miss Johnson, Elena whispered, tears in her eyes. My daughter watched your interview on the news. She said she wants to be like you, someone who stands up to bullies and wins. You've given her a hero who looks like her. The weight of that responsibility settled on Amara's shoulders, but it was a weight she carried proudly. This wasn't just about her revenge anymore. It was about every Elena, every daughter who needed to see that power could be challenged, that truth could triumph. The last image the society photographers captured was Amara leaving on Jasper's arm, backlit by the museum's lights like an avenging angel, while the Langstons sat in the shadows of their own, making the social destruction was complete. Every club would revoke their memberships. Every board would demand their resignations. Every invitation would be withdrawn. They would become pariahs in the only world they'd ever valued. And unlike Amara, they had nowhere else to go. But the true destruction went deeper than social standing. It was the knowledge spreading through their circle like wildfire that they'd been outsmarted by someone they'd considered beneath them, that every racist joke, every cruel comment, every moment of dismissive arrogance had been documented by the woman serving their wine. As Amara's car pulled away from the museum, she could see through the windows as the gala continued without her, the conversations animated, the gossip flowing as freely as the champagne. By tomorrow, every detail would be dissected in society pages and social media. The Langstons' humiliation would be complete and public. But tonight, she had more important things to attend to. Her mother was flying in from Louisiana tomorrow, bringing with her the warmth and wisdom the Langston world had never possessed. Together, they would finish preparing the nursery, filling it with love instead of judgment, with pride instead of prejudice. The girl from Louisiana they'd tried to diminish had become the queen of their court, and her first decree was their banishment. Chapter 8. The Legal Victory. The courtroom in the New York Supreme Court building had seen dynasties rise and fall, but rarely had it witnessed a demolition as complete as what unfolded on that April morning. Judge Delphine Ashford, known for her intolerance of prejudice and her encyclopedic knowledge of family law, presided over the custody hearing that had drawn media attention from around the world. The Langstons had pulled their remaining resources for one last legal assault, hiring Nathaniel Hawthorne, the attorney who'd never lost a custody case. Amara sat with quiet dignity, her pregnancy now advanced, flanked by Ezekiel Harrington and his team. She'd chosen a simple navy dress and her grandmother's pearl necklace, a visual counterpoint to Vivian's desperate designer outfit that screamed old money she no longer possessed. "Your Honor," Hawthorne began, his voice resonating with practiced authority, "my clients seek reasonable grandparent visitation rights. Despite the acrimonious divorce, these children deserve to know their paternal heritage." Their heritage. Ezekiel stood slowly, his presence commanding despite his smaller stature. "Your Honor, I have here 17 hours of recorded conversations that detail exactly what heritage the Langstons wish to impart." The bailiff distributed tablets to all parties. Judge Ashford put on her reading glasses, her expression growing increasingly stern as she listened. Vivian's voice filled the courtroom. "If she insists on having children, we'll need to ensure they're raised properly. None of that ethnic nonsense she grew up with. They'll need to learn to overcome their disadvantages. Then, Clarence, the boys can inherit, but if they're girls, well, mixed girls have limited prospects anyway. We'll set up small trusts, nothing substantial. Sophia's contribution was perhaps the worst. At least if they're light enough, we can say they're Mediterranean. No one needs to know about the other side." Marcus's voice, slurred with alcohol. "I'll have real heirs with Vanessa. These ones with Amara are just obligations." The courtroom was silent, except for the recordings. Each word was a nail in the coffin of their case. Judge Ashford's face had turned to stone. "There's more, Your Honor," Ezekiel said. "Financial records showing the Langstons diverted money meant for a trust for the unborn children into their own accounts. Medical records showing they tried to have Miss Johnson declared mentally incompetent to gain control of her assets. And this, he produced a document with a flourish, a contract they tried to force Miss Johnson to sign, giving them full custody in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges they knew were baseless. "This is vindictive fiction," Vivian burst out, "breaking protocol. That woman has poisoned everyone against us. She's turned our own words. Your own words condemn you," Judge Ashford interrupted, her voice arctic. "Please continue, Mr. Harrington." Ezekiel played another recording, this one from just a week prior, captured by a private investigator the Langstons had hired, who'd switched sides after hearing their plans. "Once we get custody," Clarence's voice said clearly, "we can limit her influence supervised visits only." We'll tell the children their mother was unstable, possibly dangerous. By the time they're old enough to question it, they'll be ours completely." Amara felt the twins move, as if they, too, were rejecting their would-be captors. She placed her hands protectively over them, drawing strength from their presence. "Your Honor," Hawthorne tried desperately. "My clients were speaking in anger, in disappointment. Surely their words shouldn't override their biological connection." "Their biological connection." Amara spoke for the first time, her voice clear and strong. "They've never once asked about the baby's health, never inquired about names, never offered genuine support. They see my children as possessions, as tools to rebuild their reputation, as heirs to a poisoned legacy." She stood, despite the weight of her pregnancy, addressing the court with the skill that had once made her a formidable attorney. "Your Honor, I have here a different kind of evidence. Letters from the community in Thibodaux, Louisiana, where my children will know their other grandparents, testimonials from the 50 law students whose scholarships I'm funding, who promise to be role models for my children. Statements from successful black professionals who've offered to mentor them, to show them that excellence doesn't require proximity to whiteness." She turned to face the Langstons directly. "You had 5 years to see me as family. You chose instead to see me as an interloper. You had 9 months to embrace these children. You chose instead to scheme for their possession. You had countless opportunities to choose love over prejudice. You chose your legacy over their well-being." "The court has heard enough," Judge Ashford announced. "Mr. and Mrs. Langston, Miss Langston. Mr. Marcus Langston, your petition for grandparent rights is not only denied, but permanently barred. Furthermore, this court issues a restraining order preventing any contact with Miss Johnson or her children until the children reach the age of 18 and can decide for themselves." "You can't," Clarence started. "I can. And I have." The judge continued. "Additionally, I'm referring these recordings to the district attorney for investigation of conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and conspiracy to commit custodial interference. Bailiff, please ensure the defendants surrender their passports before leaving." Vivian collapsed into her chair. Marcus's face had gone gray. Sophia was crying, her mascara running in streams that no amount of privilege could stop. "Furthermore," Judge Ashford said, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment, "this court orders the immediate liquidation of any remaining Langston assets to pay the legal fees Miss Johnson has incurred defending against your frivolous lawsuits. The era of using wealth to bludgeon others into submission is over, at least in my courtroom." As court security moved to collect their passports, Amara felt a sudden sharp pain. Liquid warmth spread beneath her, and she gripped the table. "My water just broke," she said calmly, though her heart was racing. The courtroom erupted in motion. Ezekiel called for an ambulance, while court officers cleared a path. In the chaos, Marcus tried to approach, but security blocked him. "Those are my children being born," he shouted. "No," Judge Ashford said firmly, "they're Miss Johnson's children. And the only thing you've contributed to their birth is the stress that's causing it to happen 3 weeks early." As the EMTs arrived with a wheelchair, Amara looked back one last time at the family that had tried to break her. They stood in a huddle of defeat, their expensive clothes unable to hide their poverty of spirit, their prestigious name unable to command respect they'd never earned. "The babies are coming," she said to no one in particular, or perhaps to everyone. "They're coming into a world where their mother stood up to injustice and won, where their strength comes from struggle overcome, not privilege inherited, where they'll never question their worth because someone else's prejudice tried to diminish it." As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, the courthouse reporters surged forward. One shouted, "Miss Johnson, any final words about the verdict?" She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "My children will be born free, free from the toxic legacy of the Langstons, free from the burden of conditional love, free to be exactly who they are, magnificent in their complexity. That's not a verdict. That's a victory." The ambulance doors closed on the image of the Langstons being escorted to a police van for processing. Their dynasty ended not with dignity, but with handcuffs and headlines. Justice had been served, and now life new. Untainted life was about to begin. Chapter 9. The Final Begging. The hospital room was filled with flowers from well-wishers, each arrangement a testament to Amara's triumph. When the Langstons made their final desperate assault on her resolve, they came together, all four of them, having somehow convinced hospital security they were there for a medical emergency. They stood in her doorway like specters of the life she'd escaped. Vivian clutching a Hermes bag that contained their last liquid assets. Clarence in a suit that hadn't been dry, cleaned in weeks. Sophia wearing sunglasses to hide eyes swollen from crying, and Marcus, hollow-eyed and unshaven, carrying an envelope that trembled in his hands. The twins, born healthy despite their early arrival, lay in their bassinet beside Amara's bed. Zara Beatrice Johnson, named for strength and her great-grandmother, and Isaiah Hawthorne Johnson, carrying the legacy of justice and truth. They were perfect Zara, with Amara's fierce eyes and determined chin, Isaiah with a gentle spirit that seemed to radiate peace. "You shouldn't be here," Amara said calmly, her hand moving to the call button. "Please," Vivian said, and the words seemed to physically pain her. "Please, just hear us out." It was the first time in 5 years Amara had heard Vivian say please without sarcasm. She hesitated, then nodded to the security guard who'd appeared. 5 minutes. They entered like supplicants approaching a throne, their usual arrogance replaced by something Amara had never seen before, genuine desperation. "We've lost everything," Clarence began, his voice barely a whisper. "The houses, the cars, the business. We're living in Sophia's studio apartment, all four of us in 700 square feet. The irony," Amara said softly, "of you seeking sympathy for living conditions better than what most Americans consider normal. We know we were wrong," Sophia burst out, tears flowing freely. "We were horrible, racist, cruel. We treated you like you were nothing when you were everything. We destroyed our own family because we couldn't see past our prejudice." Amara studied them, these people who'd once seemed so powerful, now reduced to begging at the bedside they'd tried to bar her from. "What do you want?" she asked directly. Marcus stepped forward, extending the envelope. "We're prepared to sign anything, any confession, any admission, any public apology you want. We'll go on television and admit everything we did. We'll testify against our former associates who participated in the discrimination. We'll dedicate our lives to your foundation, if that's what it takes." "In exchange for one photo," Vivian whispered, "one photo with our grandchildren, one moment to see them, to know they exist, to have something to remember when we're old and alone." The twins stirred, making small sounds that drew everyone's attention. Isaiah opened his eyes, Amara's eyes, and seemed to look directly at the Langstons. Zara yawned, her tiny fist waving in the air like she was already fighting. "Do you know what you took from me?" Amara asked quietly. "Not the obvious things, my career, my dignity, my father's last moments, but the subtle thefts. The way I stopped singing because Vivian said my voice was too earthy. The way I stopped cooking my grandmother's recipes because Clarence called the smells invasive. The way I stopped wearing bright colors because Sophia said they made me look aggressive." She stood, moving to the bassinet, lifting Zara into her arms. The baby settled against her chest with absolute trust. "You tried to erase me," she continued, piece by piece, comment by comment, slight by slight. "You wanted me to disappear into your whiteness, to become nothing more than a vessel for airs you could mold into your image. We were wrong," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "God, Amara, we were so wrong. I loved you. I did, but I loved my family's approval more. I chose them over you every single time. And now I've lost everything that mattered." "No," Amara corrected. "Now you understand what loss feels like. There's a difference." Vivian fell to her knees, something Amara would never have imagined possible. "I'm 71 years old," she said, her voice raw. "I've spent my entire life believing lies my parent taught me, perpetuating poison I never questioned. These babies, your babies, they're the only chance for our bloodline to mean something better. Please, I'm begging you. Let us have one photo. Let us see them once." "Your bloodline?" Amara asked. "These children don't carry your blood, Vivian. According to you, blood is about purity, about maintaining lines, about preservation of what you consider superior. These children's blood is mixed, mingled, magnificent in its complexity, everything you feared, everything you tried to prevent. She picked up Isaiah, holding both twins now, their weight a reminder of what she'd protected them from. But here's what you never understood, she continued. These children do carry something from you, something I wish I could remove but can't. They carry the genetic possibility of your hatred. Somewhere in their DNA is the potential for the kind of cruelty you perfected, and I will spend every day of their lives making sure that potential never actualizes. Clarence pulled out a checkbook, his hands shaking. We have one asset left. A trust fund in Switzerland that the lawyers couldn't touch. $2 million. It's yours. All of it for one photo. $2 million for a photo. Amara almost laughed. You still think everything has a price? Everything does, Sophia said desperately. You proved that. You bought our destruction. Now let us buy one memory. Amara looked at them, really looked at them. Vivian on her knees, designer dress crumpled. Clarence with his checkbook, trying to purchase what money couldn't buy. Sophia, stripped of her social media filters and her carefully curated life. Marcus, the man she'd once loved, reduced to a shadow of his former self. Let me tell you about the price of memory, Amara said, her voice taking on a quality that made them all lean in. Every night, for 2 years, I paid the price of remembering your cruelty. I'd lie awake replaying every insult, every dismissal, every moment you made me feel less than human. The price of those memories was pieces of my soul that I had to reclaim one by one. She walked to the window, still holding both babies. The price of memory is also what these children will never have to pay. They'll never have memories of being told their hair is wrong, their skin is too dark, their heritage is shameful. They'll never remember sitting at a dinner table where they're tolerated instead of celebrated. But they'll have questions. Vivian started. Yes, Amara agreed. And I'll answer them. I'll tell them their biological grandparents existed but couldn't love them properly. I'll explain it the way you explain any tragedy to children honestly, but age appropriately. By the time they're old enough to understand the full truth, they'll be so secure in who they are that your rejection will be a historical footnote, not a defining wound. You want to buy a memory, she continued. Let me tell you about memories. I remember Vivian telling me my children would need nose jobs to correct their ethnic features. I remember Clarence suggesting we use donors to ensure better genetic outcomes. I remember Sophia posting that I was breeding stock that finally produced. I remember Marcus standing silent through it all. She set the twins back in their bassinet, then pulled out her phone. But I also remember this. She played a voice recording from 2 years ago, her own voice, strong and clear. I promise you, future children, that you will never doubt your worth. You will never beg for scraps of love. You will never feel like guests at your own family table. You will be surrounded by people who see your beauty, your brilliance, your blackness as gifts to celebrate, not defects to overcome. That's the only memory that matters, she said. The promise I made before they were even conceived. The promise your hatred made necessary. So, no. Vivian's voice was barely audible. No photo, no moment, nothing. Amara moved to the window, looking out at the city below. You know what? I'll give you something better than a photo. Hope flickered in their eyes. I'll give you the truth, she said. These children will grow up knowing exactly who you are, not the lies you'd tell them, not the revised history you'd create, but the truth. They'll see the recordings. They'll read the transcripts. They'll understand that their maternal family chose love, while their paternal family chose hate. She turned back to face them. And when they're 18, if they choose to find you, if you're still alive, that will be their decision. But they'll come armed with truth, immunized against your poison, strong in the knowledge of who they are. They won't come as supplicants or grandchildren. They'll come as judges, and you'll have to answer for everything. 18 years, Marcus whispered. They'll be adults. We'll be strangers. You're strangers now, Amara said. You've always been strangers. You just had proximity, not relationship, position, not love, claims, not bonds. Clarence made one last attempt, pulling out a leather folder. These are the deeds to properties in Europe, hidden assets the lawyers don't know about. worth at least 10 million. All of it for just one moment with them. 10 million for a moment. Amara shook her head. Clarence, you could offer me $1 billion, and my answer would be the same. These children are not for sale. Their safety, their peace, their freedom from your toxicity, these things have no price. Then what was the point of destroying us? Sophia asked bitterly. If not for money, if not for revenge, why? For them, Amara said simply, gesturing to the sleeping twins. Every move I made, every document I gathered, every asset I seized, it was all to ensure they would never be vulnerable to you. Your destruction was just the necessary step to their protection. The security guard reappeared. Ma'am, their time is up. As they turned to leave, broken and empty-handed, Vivian looked back one last time. Will you at least tell them we existed? They'll know you existed, Amara said. The same way we know diseases that have been eradicated existed as something dangerous that previous generations had to overcome so future ones could be free. That's cruel, Marcus said quietly. No, Amara corrected. Cruel was telling me I was lucky, you chose me. Cruel was watching your mother humiliate me while you stayed silent. Cruel was sleeping with another woman while I miscarried our first child alone. What I'm doing isn't cruel. It's necessary. We'll wait, Vivian said suddenly, desperately. 18 years, we'll wait. We'll change. We'll grow. We'll become people worthy of knowing them. Maybe you will, Amara said. Or maybe you'll spend 18 years the way you spent the last 5, believing you're entitled to what you haven't earned. Either way, it won't matter. By then, these children will be fully formed, brilliant, confident adults who know exactly who they are. Your approval or disapproval will be irrelevant to them. As they finally left, shuffling out like the broken remnants they'd become, Amara heard Clarence say to Vivian, "We did this to ourselves." It was the first true thing any of them had said in 5 years. The door closed behind them with the soft click of finality. Through the window, Amara could see them in the parking lot below, 4 figures huddled against the wind, made small by their losses. Walking toward a future, emptied of everything they'd valued, the twins slept on, peaceful in their innocence, protected by their mother's strength, and surrounded by the love of chosen family who'd arrived throughout the day. Her mother, Beatrice, her aunts and cousins from Louisiana, Jasper and his wife, the law students she'd mentored, the community that had claimed her when her married family had rejected her. You did the right thing, Beatrice said softly, having witnessed the whole exchange from the corner. Those babies don't need nothing from people who would have taught them to hate half of themselves. I know, Mama, Amara said, exhaustion finally hitting her. But seeing them like that, broken, desperate, finally understanding what they lost, it doesn't feel like victory. It just feels necessary. Necessary is its own kind of victory, baby, Beatrice said wisely. You protected your children from poison dressed up as privilege. That's the greatest victory a mother can achieve. The final begging was over. The Langstons would get no photo, no moment, no memory to soften their suffering. They would get exactly what they'd given, nothing but the truth of their own choices, reflected back at them for the rest of their lives. As night fell over New York, Amara held her sleeping twins and knew that she'd given them the greatest gift possible: freedom from the burden of conditional love, from the weight of others' prejudice, from the poison of a legacy that would have taught them to be less than they were. 5 years had passed since the Christmas morning that changed everything, and Amara stood in the garden of her estate in Martha's Vineyard, watching her children play in the golden afternoon light. Zara and Isaiah, now 4 and a half, were brilliant souls who carried themselves with the confidence of the deeply loved. They spoke 3 languages, English, French, and Creole, and knew their history from both sides, the beautiful and the ugly, the triumphant and the tragic. They were being raised by a village that included their grandmother, Beatrice, their aunts from Louisiana, and a chosen family of successful, principled people who modeled excellence without arrogance. "Mama, look," Isaiah called, showing her the painting he'd made, swirls of color that reminded her of the Louisiana sunsets her father had loved. "It's you and us and Gromeyer and everyone who loves us." "It's beautiful, baby," she said, kneeling despite her designer dress to examine his work properly. "You've got your great-grandfather's artistic eye." Zara ran over, her braids flying, carrying a book of poetry she'd been attempting to read. "Mama, what does legacy mean?" Before Amara could answer, a car pulled up the long driveway. She recognized the vehicle, a rental, modest, nothing like the luxury cars that used to define the Langstons' arrival anywhere. They emerged slowly, all four of them, but they were barely recognizable as the people who'd once terrorized her existence. Vivian, now 76, walked with a cane, her hair completely gray, her designer clothes replaced by simple, practical wear. Clarence, thin and bent, looked every one of his 78 years. Sophia had gained weight, her Instagram perfection abandoned for reality. And Marcus. Marcus looked hollow, like a man who'd been emptied and never refilled. "Stay here, loves," Amara told her children, walking toward the uninvited guests while her security team moved into position. "We know we're violating the restraining order," Clarence said immediately. "We're prepared to be arrested. But we had to come." "Why?" Amara asked simply. Vivian reached into her bag, not Hermes anymore, just simple leather, and pulled out a thick folder. "We've spent 5 years doing what you said, living with our choices, and we've learned things." She opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings, photos, printed emails. "You're in the news constantly. Your foundation has put 300 students through law school. Your children's book is a bestseller. Isaiah's art was featured in that gallery showing of child prodigies. Zara's reading at a high school level. You've been watching us from a distance," Marcus said quietly. "Always from a distance, never violating the order until today. But we've seen everything, every triumph, every milestone we missed." Sophia stepped forward. "We've been going to therapy, real therapy. Not the kind where you pay someone to agree with you. We've confronted what we were, what we did." She pulled out her phone, showing Amara a screen. "I've been volunteering at a community center in the Bronx, teaching kids social media literacy for free. The director doesn't know who I am. I use my middle name. But I'm trying to give back something. Anything. To balance what I took." Clarence cleared his throat. "I've been testifying against my former associates, my old company policies. I've helped convict certain executives for discrimination. I'm known as the traitor who turned on his own kind. It's the only useful thing I've ever done. And I teach," Vivian said, her voice stronger, English as a second language to immigrants. "The people I once thought were beneath me are now the ones teaching me about resilience, about courage, about starting over when everything is lost." Marcus hadn't spoken beyond his initial words. He stood apart slightly, looking past Amara to where the children played, visible through the garden gate. "Is that them?" he whispered. Amara turned to look at her children. Zara was reading to Isaiah now, her voice clear and confident. They were golden in the afternoon light, perfect in their innocence, complete in their security. "Yes," she said simply. "They're beautiful," Vivian breathed. "They're so beautiful." "They're everything you feared," Amara said. "Proudly black, brilliantly mixed, culturally rich, completely themselves. They know their worth comes from within, not from others' validation. They speak with their ancestors' voices and dream with unlimited possibility." "We know," Clarence said. "We know what we lost. We know what we threw away. We're not here to ask for forgiveness or access or anything we don't deserve." "Then why are you here?" Marcus finally spoke fully. "To give you this." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a legal document. "We're signing away any claim to inheritance, any future lawsuits, any possibility of challenging your choices," he explained. "But more than that, we're leaving the country. Vivian's sister in Scotland will take us in. We'll never bother you again." "But we needed you to know," Vivian said, tears flowing freely, "that you won. Not just the money or the custody or the revenge. You won because you were right about everything. We were monsters dressed in designer clothes. We were poison wrapped in privilege. And you saved your children from us." Amara looked at them, really looked at them. They were broken, but perhaps in that breaking, they'd found something like humanity. Too late for it to matter, but real nonetheless. "Mama." Zara's voice called. "Can we show our new friends, our paintings?" The Langstons froze, hearing her voice for the first time, clear, confident, unburdened. "I'll be right there, sweetheart," Amara called back, then faced the Langstons one last time. "You want to know about victory," she said. "Victory is my children never experiencing a moment of self-doubt because of their race. Victory is them being surrounded by successful black professionals who show them daily that excellence has many faces. Victory is them knowing their history, all of it, and still standing proud." She gestured toward the house. "Victory is Jasper Thornton being their godfather, teaching Isaiah about business while respecting his artistic soul. Victory is Judge Delphine Ashford, teaching Zara about justice and law. Victory is their grandmother Beatrice, telling them stories of ancestors who survived the unsurvivable dot hole. But the greatest victory," she looked directly at Marcus, "the greatest victory is that they don't know you exist. You're not the villains in their story because you're not in their story at all. They don't have a void where paternal grandparents should be because that space is filled with chosen family who earn their place daily." Vivian sobbed quietly. Clarence placed a shaking hand on her shoulder. "You fought for them," Sophia said. "When we tried to take them, you fought." "I didn't fight for them," Amara corrected. "I fought for the right to raise them free from your poison. There's a difference." A car pulled up Jasper's Tesla, right on time for the children's piano lessons. He emerged, saw the Langstons, and immediately moved to Amara's side. "Everything okay?" he asked, his presence a wall of protection. "They were just leaving," Amara said. "Forever." As the Langstons turned to go, Marcus looked back one last time. "Do they know my name?" "No," Amara said with finality. "They know their father was someone who couldn't love them properly, so I loved them twice as hard. That's all they need to know." The Langstons got into their rental car and drove away. Amara knew it was the last time she'd ever see them. They would go to Scotland, live in exile, and eventually die knowing they'd lost not just a legal battle, but the chance to know two extraordinary souls. "Mama," Isaiah ran up, grabbing her hand. "Come see. Zara wrote a poem about our family." As the children pulled her toward the house, chattering excitedly about their day, Amara felt the last weight of the past lift from her shoulders. Behind them, the rental car disappeared down the road, taking with it the last remnants of a toxic legacy. In the garden, Zara stood on a small stage they'd built for performances, her voice clear and strong. "We are the children of survivors and thrivers, born from love that conquered hate. We carry songs from Louisiana waters and dreams that refuse to wait. We are Isaiah and Zara, black and beautiful and free. We are our mother's greatest victory, and everything we're meant to be." The small audience, Beatrice, Jasper and his family, various aunts and cousins, erupted in applause. Amara lifted her daughter off the stage, holding her close as Isaiah wrapped his arms around them both. "Mama, why are you crying?" Isaiah asked, worried. "Happy tears, my love," she said, kissing both their foreheads. "The happiest tears in the world." As the sun set over Martha's vineyard, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Amara stood surrounded by chosen family and blood family, by love that was earned and love that was given freely. The Langstons were gone, not just from their lives, but from their relevance. They were footnotes in a story that had transcended them. Jasper raised a glass of champagne. "To Amara Johnson," he said, "who showed us all that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building a life so beautiful they become irrelevant. To the twins," Beatrice added, "who will never know the weight of conditional love. To the future," Amara said, raising her own glass, "which belongs to those brave enough to claim it." As the celebrations continued into the evening, Amara stepped away for a moment, looking out at the ocean. She thought of that Christmas morning 5 years ago, when she'd handed Marcus those 2 envelopes that changed everything. She'd known then what she was doing, not just seeking revenge, but liberation. The greatest victory wasn't that she'd won. It was that her children would never have to fight the same battle. They would grow up in a world where their worth was unquestioned, their brilliance expected, their blackness celebrated. They would never sit at a table where they were tolerated rather than treasured. In the distance, a plane passed overhead, perhaps carrying the Langstons to their self-imposed exile. Amara didn't watch it go. Instead, she turned back to her family, her real family, and rejoined the celebration of a life rebuilt from the ashes of what others had tried to burn down. The Christmas papers had been the beginning, but this was the ending she'd always deserved, not with the Langstons' tears or pleas or broken apologies, but with their complete irrelevance in the face of the beautiful life she'd built without them. The greatest revenge was a life well lived, and Amara Johnson had lived it magnificently,